Welcome to another edition of News in Depth here on TVP World. I'm your host Benjamin Lee, and please join me and my guests on this next interview. Now, Iran is facing its most serious unrest in years, driven by economic hardship, political repression, and growing public anger at the regime. As Tehran tightens control at home, its deepening partnership with Russia adds a crucial geopolitical dimension. Joining us today on TVP World to examine this is Marcin Zaborowski, our Europe editor at TVP World. Hello and welcome back again.
Hello, Ben.
So over the week, a lot has developed, and in light of a recent protest, the German Chancellor is saying that he does not think the current regime will hold. We actually have a statement by the Chancellor. Let's take a look.
At the moment, I am concerned about the news that the police, the so-called revolutionary guards in Iran, are becoming increasingly violent towards their own people. I would like to take this opportunity to once again call on the Mullah regime to stop this violence immediately. I assume that we are now seeing the last days and weeks of this regime. It has no legitimization through elections among the population anyway. The population is now rising up against this regime. I hope that there is a way to end this conflict peacefully. The Mullah regime must realize that now. And we are in a close dialogue with the American government and the European governments. We expressed our views in this direction last week in the E3 format of the UK, France and Germany. And the foreign policy makers, including the foreign ministers, are in close contact with one another in order to ensure that a peaceful transition to a democratically legitimized government can now take place in Iran.
So what do you think about Merz's assessment? Do you follow the same line of thinking that perhaps this regime seen largely as illegitimate might not be able to hold the discontent of the people soon?
Well, as to the actual timetable, we are really uncertain because actually, as of today, the protests have a little bit calmed down because the regime has been cracking down on the protests so much that at least 2,000 people dead, if not more. So anybody taking to the streets, they know that they can be shot. Yeah. So that clearly is keeping some people at home. If the regime continue doing that, if there is no external intervention, which it might be, because it was sort of promised by Donald Trump, then regime would probably continue for some time. But I absolutely agree with that the legitimacy of this regime is gone. So it reminds me a little bit of a situation like in Poland when the martial law was introduced in December 1981. So yes, the regime did manage to crack down on the protests. People had to stay home. There were extraordinary security measures. They bought themselves a little bit of time, but nobody no longer really believed in sustainability of this regime. And I think that we would have the same situation here. Even if there is no external US intervention, even if there is no some kind of extraordinary measures being applied, no cracks within the regime itself, because that might also happen. So yes, they would survive, they would continue, but it's on borrowed time.
Right. Last week, when everyone's discussing this, things could still go both ways, and we're not really sure as of yet whether or not this will kind of die down or start to escalate. And it appears this week that this has turned from isolated flare-ups into a national-wide political challenge. What do you think is the pivotal point? What do you think turned these protests from kind of these smaller scale thing to a nationwide movement?
I would call it the coalition of grievances. So in the past, the protests were about things like women's rights, for example, or the electoral protests because people thought that the election results were falsified. And this time around, we have all these issues in play, but on the top of that is also a very dire economic situation in Iran. The whole protest really started from the street vendors' grievances expressing themselves, and then the other groups joined in. So everything started from a sort of a bread and butter economic issues. People were simply unhappy about the economic situation, and then the other rights groups are joining it. Again, and I'm sorry to bang on about, but that a little bit reminds me about what happened in Poland in 1980, when Solidarity movement came into being. It also started actually as an economic protest, and then the other political, ideologically, anti-communist motivated groups, joined in. And only then it became a massive movement. And this is what we are seeing in Iran today.
Right. Previously, the Washington administration has warned that if Iran uses force to crack down on these protesters, they will make a move. And recently, Donald Trump has made another statement, a lot stronger this time. Let's take a look.
Iranian patriots, keep protesting, take over your institutions, save the names of the killers and abusers. They will pay a big price. I have cancelled all meetings with Iranian officials until the senseless killing of protesters stops. Help is on its way.
How much do you think Trump's words, as well as the willingness of the Washington administration to take action, is emboldening the protests within as well?
I think it is a factor, even though the internet is completely shut down in Iran, and that social media posts is probably not filtering very massively into the country. But yes, I mean, protesters with the time were starting to call for geopolitical change, and for example, they've been calling and chanting the name of a Shah. Of the son of the deposed Shah of Iran, who's been residing in the United States and who was ousted in 1979. So in the past, people who were protesting were not kind of calling for the return of the past regime. Now they are doing it. That suggests that people are desperate to have anything else, some kind of a central figure who can replace the existing theocratic regime. So in that respect, yes, I think it's meaningful that this is happening. Now, about the actual impact of American promised help coming in its way, well, I hope that President Trump really means what he says. But if not, then he's putting people's lives at risk. Yeah, because we have a situation which, he's calling for people to go into the streets to protest, and, the regime is shooting at these people. So their lives are being put at risk, and let's just hope that it's not for nothing.
Yeah, definitely. Speaking of being desperate for change, we've also had several interviews with people close to the topic and people, Iranian scholars as well, and they are saying mostly that people within the country are cautiously positive towards the idea of a regime change, not because they don't know what happened after Libya or some of the more disastrous regime change, but at this point, if there's no outside influence, they don't see a path towards actually overthrowing the regime. Do you think that this is the path forward for these people to eventually, be it overthrow the government, be it have a different regime, be it regaining the freedom, that it needs to be done from the outside in combination with the resistance from within?
I think it's too late for a gradual change. Okay. I think that we are witnessing here either a collapse or a victory of a revolution, of another revolution, really. I mean, people have been killed, at least 2,000 people, if not more. The regime knows that it's on its last legs. So they either gonna come heavy and continue cracking down, and people would get scared and then apathetic, and then they would come out sooner or later again, or there will be actually a successful revolution. So meaning a profound change and deposing the theocratic regime. For now, we have not really seen the crack within the Mullah regime. So we don't see somebody like, for example, the from armed forces to come out and say, we're not going to be shooting at people. Something which happened during the Arab Spring, for example, in Egypt or in Tunisia, in places like that. So we have not seen it. So and although the Iranian regime is full of is very fractured, it has moderate, it has fundamentalists, it has conservatives, it has many ethnic groups. That's also another factor here. They know that when push comes to shove, they have to stand together because people at this point in time really hate them in Iran.
Right. Do you think that Iran now sees public anger as a bigger threat, or perhaps the United States, or be it internal politics? You mentioned earlier that perhaps even the fractured factions might have to consolidate due to the fact of the public anger. So what do you think they see as the biggest threat right now?
I think it's these first two factors. So the public anger, people are angry about mismanaged economy. They also want more rights. And then a possibility of American intervention. And that's a very interesting factor here in this quote from Donald Trump. So yesterday, even today, still there was an expectation that there will be a meeting between Trump officials and the Iranians. The Iranians have reached out, and Trump said that they are reaching out and we'll be talking to them. And now he says, I canceled it all. Help is on its way. That suggests that we might be faced with something really, transformational here. And, whatever we think about Donald Trump, the truth is that, he is ready to do radical things, as we have seen in Venezuela. If we are into something like that happening in Iran, or something, radical, then yes, then we will be seeing really the revolution gaining the stream and possibly a change of major proportions in Iran. If it's another promise of a 25% tariffs or announced on social media, then it's not going to impress anybody.
Right. But recently we've also seen an announcement issued by the United States to tell Americans within Iran to evacuate the country. So we'll of course have to keep an eye out to see how things develop. And in the meantime, the Iranian government and the president is trying to blame this unrest perhaps completely, if not partially, on either the United States or Israel. We do have a statement from the Iranian president. Let's take a look.
The United States and Israel are sitting there giving instructions to these people, telling them, go ahead, we are backing you. The same ones who struck this country and killed our young people and our children are now giving them orders, telling them, you do this work, we are with you. You go and carry out acts of sabotage and we will support you from behind.
Now, how effective do you think this Tehran strategy of blaming foreign interference rather than addressing some of these grievances?
I think it's interesting because we had similar conversation, you and me, about a week ago, and the same president was saying, don't point your fingers at America and at the others. Yeah? And what is he doing today? That's exactly what he's doing. So a week ago, he was playing moderate and was saying, we have to reform, we have to change. Right. And now he's together with the mullahs. So the president who is elected in perhaps not free election, but some kind of election in Iran, who was positioning himself as a moderate, now he's staying firmly with the conservatives. So that suggests that they know that if a change is coming, it will be radical. Right. So they consolidate. Right. Whether, how important is the external factor at this point in time in Iran, I don't think it's of major proportions. Of course, the American intelligence must have its assets within the Iranian government, but this is far more disciplined governmental apparatus than what we have seen in Venezuela, for example, where the government was thoroughly infiltrated by the American intelligence. Yeah? Here, I would be surprised if that's the case. United States does not have a diplomatic representation. The relations between the two countries were broken 45 years ago in 1979. So it's very difficult for the American, not to mention the Israelis, to actually effectively penetrate Iran.
And then lastly, I would like to bring the topic also to a more geopolitical kind of perspective to this region, because we do know that, of course, Russia and Iran has this historical alliance. Do you think that this is going to have a ripple effect that indirectly or directly impact Russia's standing as well?
Absolutely. I mean, Russia, it has to be said, has been very unsuccessful with keeping its alliances in the region. So in the past, it had allies in the form of Syria, Iran, obviously its closest ally in the region, and Hamas and Hezbollah in Lebanon. So now Russia is just left really with what's left of Hamas and Hezbollah, both of which have been weakened. Syria is now led by pro-American forces. And it looks like that Iran, even if the current regime survives, it will really need to focus on self-consolidation rather than on helping Russia fighting Ukraine.
All right, like I said, with Iran out of the picture, Syria out of the picture, and we recently, of course, saw Trump taking out Maduro as well, which is Russia's ally in Latin America. It does seem like his power and influence is waning. Meanwhile, when it comes to Europe, how do you think Europe should be reacting? And do you think this is going to change some strategic calculus in the region and even regarding to Russia as well?
So Europe has always been involved in various negotiations on nuclear disarmament of Iran, on a nuclear deal rather, I would like to say, as a land of potential opportunities for Iran. So it was like the Americans were holding a stick and the Europeans were meant to offer a carrot. So in the past it worked that way, but the Americans were saying if you don't do this and that, then you may be expecting, harsher sanctions or even an intervention. And the Europeans, but if you do as we ask, then Europeans might open up the market, and sanctions could be lifted, and you may have more economic opportunities. And we have pretty much the same situation today. Iran is a close neighbor of the European Union. It's a direct neighbor to Turkey. And Turkey is a candidate for EU membership, but of course it's not going to become an EU member in the even foreseeable future of any nature. But still, Iran is a kind of in the vicinity of Europe. Germany, for example, has for a long time been a major foreign investor in Iran, and France has always been eyeing with a lot of appetite the possibility for investment in the energy sector in Iran. Iran has a second biggest oil reserve in the world. So it's a land of lots of oil, lots of gas, very little investment.
Yeah, and the fact that they did still manage to be able to run the economy to the ground is probably one of the biggest reasons why people are now very upset as well. Well, thank you so much for helping us round up everything. And of course, we'll have to see how things develop. But in the meantime, really appreciate it. And thank you for your input and insight.
Thank you.
Cheers. And thank you for tuning into this edition of News in Depth. But for more news, update, and commentary, please stay tuned to TVP World.